Hi, my name's Paul Grogan and welcome to the first in a two-part series of videos where I'm going to be teaching you how to play Undaunted Stalingrad, designed by David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin and published by Osprey Games, who kindly asked me to create this video. Undaunted Stalingrad is the fourth box in the Undaunted series of games. However, it's a standalone product. You don't need to have played any of the other games in the Undaunted series before jumping into this one. In this video, I'm going to be teaching two friends, Rob and Paul, how to play the game. Neither of them have played any game in the Undaunted series before, so it's going to be a full teach on everything that you need to know to be able to play Scenario 1. This is a campaign-driven game, and it starts off with the first mission with relatively simple rules, and then it will build on those rules over the course of the campaign as it progresses. So in this video, I'm just going to be teaching everything you need to know to play Mission 1. In the second video in the series, then we're actually going to be playing through the game in full. So if you already know how to play Undaunted Stalingrad and you just want to watch two people playing it for the first time, you can go and check out the other video, but I'd recommend watching this one first. Now, if you have already played the other games in the Undaunted series, then you're still going to have to watch this video to learn how to play Undaunted Stalingrad, because there are a few rules differences. And as I'm teaching Rob and Paul how to play, I will make reference to the rules that are different in Undaunted Stalingrad to the other versions. Now, that doesn't make any sense to those two because they've not played before, but I did want to call that out while doing the teach so that people watching this video who've already played the other games in the Undaunted series know specifically what's different. Okay, that's everything. So let's jump to the table and let's join Rob, Paul and me, and let's learn how to play. Right, so I'm going to be teaching you two how to play Undaunted Stalingrad. Now, neither of you two have played any of the Undaunted series before, which is fine, because this is one where you can actually play this game first. We're going to be playing through Scenario 1 today. Now, there's two ways you can start playing this game. You could just play Scenario 1. In fact, the rulebook recommends you set up Scenario 1, you play Scenario 1, but not part of the campaign. You literally just play through the scenario to learn how to play, and then once you know how to play, you then play Scenario 1 again as if it was the campaign. Now, it's exactly the same, but if you're not playing it as part of the campaign, then you just play it and nothing happens afterwards. But if you're playing it as part of the campaign, then after it's finished, some of the soldiers might have got killed, some of them might upgrade and things like that. And we're going to see that after the end of the playthrough. But right now, I'm just going to be teaching you both how to play the game. Now, I'm going to be teaching you all of the rules that you need for this scenario. That is not all of the rules for Undaunted Stalingrad. Because it's a campaign system, various other rules will be introduced later on in the game where we get mines, we get vehicles, we get things like that. So we're just going to learn today the rules that you need to get started with Scenario 1. Yeah. Right. Okay, so this is a deck-building tactical war game set in the theatre of war of Stalingrad. Very important time during World War II. It is a scenario-based game. As I said, we're playing Scenario 1 today. But when you're playing the campaign, the results of one scenario will impact on the next scenario. There is a big narrative system included in the game, so you'll read a bit of story. And then, yeah, depending on who won the previous scenario, it's basically a branching storyline. So you might play different scenarios depending on who wins the previous one and things like that. It is a campaign system, not a legacy system. So there is no stickers, there's no ripping up of cards. It's fully resettable. You can play through the campaign multiple times. And what you're doing is you'll be replacing cards with different ones, and you might be replacing some of these tiles. So there's a building here. When that building gets blown up, we'll replace this tile with a different tile, and that will last for the rest of the campaign. So there's no legacy element to the game as such. So yeah, this video, as I say, we're going to be teaching you how to play. And there are also, for those people who are watching this video who have played Undaunted Normandy or North Africa, there are some differences. Now, I'm going to call out those differences when I get to them. For you two, this won't mean anything because you don't know how to play those games. But for anybody watching who wants to know what the differences are, I will specifically call them out. Right. So, overview of the game. We're going to be playing the game in a series of rounds. In each round, you're going to draw 4 cards from your deck. One of those cards you will secretly choose at the same time to be your initiative card. And then, in initiative order, you will each take a turn. And on your turn, you will play the rest of the cards in your hand. Once both of you have done that, that's the end of the round. You put the cards in your discard pile. Round 2, you draw 4 cards. We repeat. Okay? The objective of the game depends on the scenario. So the objective of this particular scenario is to control 4 objective points. Some of the areas on the board, you will notice, have these objective values. And if you control 4 of them, or one's worth 4, because these two are worth 2, then you win the game. Also, if you manage to rout all of the opponent's riflemen
Now, routing is a new thing from Undaunted Stalingrad that didn't exist in any previous games. But if you manage to route, if you just pass me one of the white flags, when you route a unit, you will put a white flag on it. And if you manage to route both of the riflemen, they're the only ones that matter for this, then you win the game through that way as well. Also, if you're playing the campaign, you can actually choose to concede at any point. And you might want to do that because if you're definitely not going to win the scenario, the longer you play, the more casualties you're going to take, which means there's more chance that some of those soldiers might actually get killed rather than just wounded. So sometimes you might just want to, get rid of it. Right. So yeah, that's an overview of how we play. Now the setup, it is a fixed map. This is the fixed map for scenario 1. There's no randomization whatsoever. Everything is fixed. So where all of the units start, which areas have been scouted, the objective points, everything is fixed. You also have, for every scenario, you have what cards both of you need. So what you have is you have your supply, which is these cards here, or these cards here, and you have your deck. So that is fixed. You can't do anything about that. The only thing that's variable, and who starts the initiative. So in this scenario, the Soviets start with the initiative, so this marker goes here. The only thing that is variable in the setup is your deck of cards, which you'll shuffle. We'll do that before the playthrough starts because I'm going to go through them. So yeah, it is a fixed map with everything for each scenario. Right, so the way that a round works is, as I mentioned, you would draw 4 cards from your hand. You'll both do that simultaneously. And then you will choose one of the cards in your hand and you'll put it face down in front of you. And that is the card which you're using to bid for initiative. Now, if you look at the cards, you'll notice there's a big number in the top left. That's the initiative value. Also notice the Fog of War cards have got a 1. They're rubbish cards to bid for initiative. That's the only thing you can do with the Fog of War card. They are dead cards in your hand apart from that.
So you can use them to...
You can use them to bid for initiative. That's all you can use them for. So you'll both play a card face down secretly from your hand. Basically, the higher the number of initiative, the better the card. So the decision is, I really want to go first, but actually this is a really good card. Okay? So you'll both play a card face down secretly. You'll then reveal those cards. Higher number wins initiative. If it's a tie, it stays with the current player. Okay? Those cards are then placed in your discard pile straight away. So you use a card for its initiative value, and then it's discarded. Then, in initiative order, you will take turns. So if the Soviets won the initiative, you would then take your turn, and you would play all of your remaining cards. So it's not one at a time, it's you do all of your cards, you play your cards, you do the things with the card, and then at the end of your turn, you put your cards in your discard pile, and then it's over to the Germans. The only card you can't play is the Fog of War cards. So technically you don't play the Fog of War cards, you just discard them into your discard pile at the end of your turn. You don't actually play them. We'll go into more details on playing cards because there's lots of different stuff on there, but that is basically how it works. It's a deck building game. You start off with 11 cards in your deck, you'll draw 4 in the first turn, 4 in the next turn. If you ever need to draw a card and your deck is empty, you will shuffle your discard pile to create a new deck and you will continue to draw. That's how that works. Any questions so far?
No, that's good.
Right, okay, so let's talk about the supply. The supply is basically extra units, extra soldiers that you can bring into your deck during the game through the bolster action. You start the game, your deck consists of 2 Fog of War cards, your platoon sergeant, which is your main character. You have 2 squad leaders, one for squad A, one for squad B. You have 1 rifleman from squad A, 1 rifleman from squad B, a scout from squad A, a scout from squad B, and a machine gunner from from squad A and a machine gunner from squad B. That's your starting deck for this scenario. The Germans have got exactly the same. Quite often, some of the other scenarios, it's asymmetric and you'll have different units and things like that. But that's your starting deck. So what you can do during the game is you can add cards from your supply into your discard pile, which then effectively become part of your deck. Now, one of the important things with this game is there's 6 locations that a card can be. I think I've counted this right. So first of all, you've got the supply, right? 2 could be in your deck. 3 could be in your discard pile. 4, it could be in your hand. 5, it could be in your played area. And 6, it can be removed from the game. So whenever a card is hit as a casualty, and we'll come on to that later, it doesn't go back to the supply. It's actually gone from the game. It goes into a casualty pile. And then at the end of the scenario, when we look at the campaign rules, the more cards you have in your casualty pile, people might actually die. Okay? But anybody that doesn't die permanently is bandaged up and comes back for the next fight. So each card actually represents one individual soldier, whereas the counters on the board represent the squad. Now, one of the big differences between Undaunted Stalingrad and the other games in the Undaunted series is these counters will never be removed from the board. So in the previous editions of the game, whenever a counter would take enough hits, the counter would actually be removed from the board. But in Undaunted Stalingrad, that never happens. Instead, it gets routed. That's where the routed markers come in. So these never get removed from the board, they just become routed. But we'll get into that more later on. So yeah, so when a card is killed, effectively, or is taken as a casualty, it goes into a separate pile, which is a removed from game pile, and that's gone. Right. So let's talk about the cards. If you just want to have a look at the cards that you've got in your hand, I will go through them individually. You'll notice that at the bottom of each card there are multiple actions. Now, when you play a card, there are 3 things you can do with it. The first one is the card, or one of the card actions. So on the bottom of the card, you'll notice that there are 2, 3, or 4 card actions. So the main thing you will do when you play a card is that you will perform one of those card actions. But that is only one of 3 things that you can do. So the second thing you can do when you play a card is to ready a unit. So one of the things that can happen in the game is the counters can become suppressed. When they become suppressed, you flip them over. You can't do any other actions with that unit until it is readied. And the way you ready it is you play Gunner's B card from your hand, and instead of doing one of the card actions, you just flip the token back. Okay, so that's the second thing you can do. The third thing you can do is quite rare. I'm going to mention it now. It's called hunkering down. I have seen this used in games, but it is quite rare. When you hunker down, you play a card, and then instead of doing something with the card, you put it back into your supply. The reason why you might want to hunker down is this is a deck building game. So these cards are going to cycle round. If you have a unit, or if you have a combat counter on the board in a location and you don't want to do anything with it, you want it to stay there, well, that card is going to keep coming back into your hand. And when it does, you're like, oh, what's this card? I don't want this card. By hunkering down, you're putting the cards back into the supply. That means the cards will not come into your hand. As I said, it is there as an option, but it is quite rare that people do it. Generally speaking, you will play a card and you will perform one of the actions on the card. Right, let's go through the actions on the card, and I'm going to go through them in what I think is a logical order, which I've written down beforehand. The first 2 actions I'm going to explain are actions related to movement. And the first one is move. So you will notice some of the cards say, actually, before we do that, there's 2 types of cards that you've got. You've got combat cards and you've got command cards. The command cards are your platoon sergeant and your 2 squad leaders. They are not represented on the board by a combat counter. So they are individuals who are, commanding the thing. You can still play the cards, you still do things with them, but they are not represented on the board by a combat counter. Okay, so it's just a slight difference between them. Right, so the move action. When you play the move action, you basically move the counter, the number of spaces according to the move action. And I think all of the cards have got move 1. I don't think any of them have got anything more than move 1. So when you move to an adjacent tile. However, one of the fundamental rules about this game is that you cannot move onto a tile unless the tile has been scouted by your side. And that's what these tokens are. So these tokens, these are actually control tokens, but they're 2-sided. That means you've got control of it. That means that you've just scouted it. You cannot use the move action to move onto a tile that you haven't scouted.
Okay.
So, for example, Rifleman B cannot perform a move action to there because he doesn't know what's there. Okay? So that is one of the fundamental rules of this game. You cannot move into an area which hasn't been scouted. Which brings me on to the next action, scout. Only your scouts have the scout action. It's followed by a number, and I believe your scouts have got scout 2.
Yep.
When you perform the scout 2, it's like a move, but you can move onto a tile which hasn't been scouted. And when you do so, it scouts it. So you can do a move to, sorry, you can do a scout to, you can go to there, which scouts there, and then you can go to there, which scouts there.
Are these up to 2?
Yes, you don't have to move 2, it can just move 1 if it wants to. Now, scouting is great because it means you've now scouted the tiles, which means your riflemen or other units can now move into them. But every time you scout a new tile, you add a Fog of War card to your discard pile. Fog of War cards, remember, they're dead cards. You can use them to bid for initiative, but you cannot use them to play or anything else. So that's the importance of scouts, and that's what the scouting does. Any questions about moving and scouting?
No, that's okay.
What I will mention is the presence of another player's control token has no impact on scouting. So for the purpose of scouting, you can both scout.
I could go from here and scout.
Absolutely.
Through there,
so you can.
I can move through.
You could go 1, 2, and scout there. And you've scouted it, and then you could move. You could scout to here.
Yeah.
So it has no bearing on the other player.
Your rifleman couldn't move from there to there as it currently stands.
Correct.
No.
My scouts are nothing like yours.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So now we've covered moving. The next action that I wanted to talk about with my sheet of paper is attacking. There's 2 types of attack in this scenario. There is attack and there is suppress. Suppress, you will roll more dice, so therefore there's more chance of hitting, but you will never actually inflict a wound. You will only suppress the unit if you're successful. So that's the difference between the 2. Other than that, the rules for how it's resolved are identical. Now I'm going to go into attacks in more detail later, but you will notice that there is a number after the attack. That is how many dice you roll. So if you've got an attack 2, you'll roll 2 dice. If you've got an attack 1, you'll only roll 1 dice. The machine gunners have got suppress 4, so you roll 4 dice. But as I say, if you get a hit, you will just suppress the unit. So we'll cover attacks later on in more detail, but basically you will choose a target unit, you'll work out what the defense value is, you'll roll some dice, and you might score a hit, you might not. Let's talk about control, because in order to win the scenario, you need to control 4 objective points. So how do you control? I believe in this initial set of starting cards, the only unit which can perform the control action is the rifleman, which is why you only need to rout the rifleman in order to get a success, because once you've routed both the riflemen, they can't then control any areas. So to control an area, you basically need to have the rifleman in there, and what you do is you flip the marker over, you now control it. That's it. And if that's worth objective points, you've now got that objective points. If there is somebody else in there, so let's go through this example, you can scout there, that's absolutely fine. You can move the rifleman in there. You can take control of that tile, even though there is an enemy there. This is a change from Undaunted Normandy. In Undaunted Normandy, you couldn't do that, but in Stalingrad, you can do that. So even if there is an enemy in that tile, if you've got a rifleman there, you can control it. Unless the enemy controlled the tile. If the enemy controlled the tile, then you cannot take control of it unless they weren't there. If they're not there and they control it, then you can take control of it off them with the control action. But if they are there, you cannot control a tile controlled by the other player if the other player has units there.
If they leave, is it still controlled by them?
You have to choose. You have to do the control action in order to switch control.
So it stays controlled until...
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, okay.
So when you control an area, you control that area. You then wander off. It's still controlled by you.
Okay.
So that is a rules change from Undaunted Normandy. But yeah, that's the control action. That's really important. That's what the riflemen are for, and that's what you're going to be doing a lot of. Right, any questions about the control action? Lots of other actions to explain. The next one to explain is bolster. The squad leaders can bolster. They both have bolster 2, but it's either A or B. So the squad leader from squad A can bolster 2 from A, and the squad leader from squad B can bolster 2 from B. Bolster means take cards from your supply and put them into your discard pile. And if you bolster with squad leader A, you can only take cards from squad A. If you bolster with squad leader B, you can only take cards from B. So they are cards from your supply into your discard pile, which is going to become part of your deck And that allows you to tune your deck. So if you add all of the machine gunners in, your machine gunners are going to come out more often. So that's how you can tailor your deck. That's the bolster action. I'm going to mention this now and I'll refer back to it later on. If you ever bolster a unit which has been routed, the rout token is immediately removed. So if they manage to rout your rifleman from B, and then you play squad leader B, and you bolster with a rifleman, as soon as you do that, the rout marker is removed. If you think about it thematically, we've called somebody in, and they've gone, oh, right, he's all right, Dave's here. Your platoon sergeant can bolster 3. There's no letter after it. So that's any 3 cards. So your platoon sergeant is the best card in the deck. You can bolster up to 3 cards. Right. Speaking of the platoon sergeant, you've got command 2. It's one of the easiest actions to explain. Draw that many cards from your deck. And remember, when it's your turn, you will play all of your cards. So basically, you play the platoon sergeant, do command 2, you draw 2 more cards, great, you do 2 more things, unless you draw 2 fog of war cards, which is a bit rubbish. Right.
But if he's commanding extra cards, he's not adding the ones to the deck. So
exactly.
He's either reinforcing or he's pushing the assault.
Or he's taking the initiative, because he's got 9.
So the card that's used for initiative is discarded.
It's discarded.
You cannot use these actions.
Absolutely. Right, next action to explain is Inspire. Your squad leaders have Inspire 1. Again, it is specifically tuned to whether it's Squad A or Squad B. And Inspire works differently in Undaunted Stalingrad than it does in Undaunted Normandy. So what you can do in Undaunted Stalingrad with the Inspire action is you reuse a card which you've previously played. So you play Scout A, you then play Squad Leader A and say, I'm going to Inspire, and you say, I'm going to Inspire Scout A, and you do it again. In the previous versions of Undaunted, you would pick the card back up and put it into your hand, which you would then play it again. It's almost the same, but for reasons that will become clear later in the campaign, you don't do that. So any Undaunted players, when you use the Inspire action, do not pick the card up and put it back in your hand. Just leave the card in play and say, I'm doing that one again. So again, think about it thematically. Inspires, the squad leader shouts some instructions, promises some cake, and the unit goes again.
Can you inspire a different action to the one that was used first?
Yeah, you can reuse the card and do a different action with it. So with the Inspire action, you can only use the card again, use one of the actions on the card.
Not hunker down.
Not to hunker down and not to ready. Right, the final 2 actions to explain are the 2 extra actions on the Scout card, which is Recon and Conceal. So those pesky Fog of War cards, how do you get rid of them? That's what the Recon action does. So when you perform the Recon action, you take a Fog of War card from your hand, you remove it from the game, and then you draw a replacement card. So it's awesome.
Oh, so it doesn't go back here?
No, it's gone from the game. So that's what the Recon action does. The Conceal action forces your opponent to add one of their Fog of War cards to their discard pile, making their deck worse.
The Recon has to be from hand.
Recon has to be from hand. Yes. Right. Any questions about the actions?
No.
Right, let's talk about attacks. So, whenever you perform the attack action or the suppress action, you will choose a target unit, which can be anywhere, absolutely anywhere on the board. There is no line of sight or anything like that in this game. And then you need to work out the defense value. So, let's just go back to this. The defense value of a unit is printed on the unit. So the gunners have a defense value of 4, scouts have a defense value of 5, riflemen have a defense value of 4. Then what you do is you add the cover bonus for the tile that they're on. So all of these tiles have a cover bonus, even if the cover bonus is 0, and you will add that to the defense of the unit. If there is another defense value like this means that the tile has a building on it. And you use that defense value if the attack is coming from somewhere other than the tile itself. So for example, Rifleman B is here. They want to shoot these gunners. It's 4 plus 1. Okay, but if Rifleman B were here, it would actually be 4 plus 3. So they get this extra defense for being in the building if the attack is coming from somewhere other than the tile itself. And then you add the range. So here it's actually 4, 5, 6, 7, and plus 1 for the range. So that's 8. Whereas if the Rifleman were here, it would be 5. That's how you work out the defence value.
It's the range one per.
It's one per tile.
Okay.
Just a quick note while we're here looking at this, you can ignore this for scenario 1. This is used in later scenarios. This means vehicles cannot enter this tile. And this is actually the defence value of the building because you can blow these buildings up with tanks and explosives and stuff like that. But that'll come later. Once you know what the target number is, you roll a certain number of dice. The riflemen have an attack of 1. The machine gunners have an attack of 2. The scouts have an attack of 1. So you roll the dice into the dice rolling tray. And as long as you get 1 success on a dice, then it's a hit. It doesn't matter how many successes you get, as long as you get 1. And a 10 is always a success, which is a 0 on these dice. Right.
And the success is...
So, if it's suppress, then at least 1 success flips the unit over. Yep. It is now suppressed. It has to then use a card to ready itself later on. If it's a normal attack, this is where you're actually inflicting a wound. What happens is the first thing you do, this isn't going to make any sense, but I'm going to say it anyway because this is the rules, but it doesn't apply to scenario 1. If you inflict a hit, the first thing you do is you look to see if the opponent has a card of that unit in their play area. They will not have a unit in their play area. They will not have a card in the play area for scenario 1. But later on, that will make more sense. 2, they look in their hand to see if they've got a card. Now, if they've already taken their turn, they won't have any cards in their hand.
Because it's in the discard pile.
Because it's in the discard pile. But if you get the initiative and you do an attack and you hit them, they have to, if they have a card in their hand, it's gone. So having the initiative is great for a number of reasons. Right. If they don't have one in their hand, you look through their discard pile. If they've got one in the discard pile, you remove it. And again, it's removed. It goes into a casualty pile. So it's gone from this game. If they don't have one in the discard pile, you look in their deck. You go through their deck and find one and remove it. If they don't have one in their deck, the unit is routed. So, hand first, well, play area first, but that doesn't apply to scenario 1. Hand, discard pile, deck. If there is no card there, the unit is routed.
Okay, so it's only after the last card is gone, you have to hit them again to route them.
Yes, but notice I didn't say supply.
Yeah.
So at the start of the game, you only have 1 Rifleman A in your deck. So whenever Rifleman A is hit, that card, wherever it is, whether it was your hand, your discard pile or your deck, it's gone. It's a casualty. If Rifleman A is hit again, you don't have a card, it becomes routed. The way you avoid your units getting routed is you bolster and put more units of that, more cards of that type into your deck. Make sense?
Yeah.
And again, the casualty pile is gone from this game. Afterwards, after the scenario, if you're playing the campaign, you then work out whether the soldier was mortally wounded or has recovered from his wounds. Right. Special rule for Undaunted Stalingrad. Whenever a unit gets routed, the opponent may move that unit, that counter, on the board 1 space to an adjacent tile as long as it's a scouted area. And in fact, every time that unit gets hit again, the opponent can move it. So that is why sometimes you want to still be attacking a unit, even though you know all of the cards have gone, because every time you hit it, you can force it to move somewhere.
Just a clarification then. For this scenario, when we said there was a win scenario, there was a win condition of
routing
riflemen.
Yes.
In effect, that means that there are no rifleman cards in the player's deck, hand,
discard pile,
anyway, but still in the supply.
Still in the supply, but they're back at home having a cup of tea.
Right.
Okay. And it's only after you've then routed both of them at the same time, which means they've both had all their cards exhausted, and they've both then been hit again to actually trigger the rout.
Yeah.
The rout only triggers if they can't discard.
If they can't get rid of a card.
And so if one gets routed, then you do need to bring them back in. You need to bolster them back in. So because a further hit would
the game can be over very quickly, right? Let's say you decide, I'm going to play a thin deck strategy. I'm not going to bolster. So Rob hits the Rifleman B and gets rid of the card. Then he hits Rifleman A and gets rid of the card. Then he hits them both again. They're both routed. Game over.
So I can't bring
them. So you kind of need to bolster the Rifleman in order to stop them being routed.
Yep.
Now, just going back to what I said earlier on, if you ever bolster a routed unit, the route marker is removed.
You don't get the card at the time?
Yeah, so when you bolster, is moving a card from the supply to your discard pile,
and
it removes that.
Yeah, because there's now a card of that type in that
in the
deck.
pool.
So it's,
Yeah.
You now have to hit them twice again in order to break them again, because one gets rid of the card, and then the second one they can't discard, that's when they break again.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. Right.
That's the rules. Have either of you got any questions about the rules?
Just one. I think it's obvious, and I think you may have said it already.
Go on.
When you win the initiative,
Yes.
this token changes to your side.
Correct. This is a two-sided token.
And you go first.
And you go first, and you play all of your cards, and you do all of your stuff.
Yeah.
So we're done, and now we're gonna play.
So I hope you found this video useful in learning how to play Undaunted Stalingrad. If you want to watch Rob and Paul now playing their first game of it, you can go and do so by clicking on the little eye in the corner or checking out the link in the description where I'll put a link to the other video in the series. Thank you very much again to Osprey Games for sponsoring this video, and if you like the content that I create and you want to support the channel directly, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingrules. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching.